The red dust of Mars swirled around Jack Stone's boots as he carefully brushed away centuries of debris from what looked like an entrance to an underground chamber. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dig site, where his small team had been working for the past 3 months. Their search for signs of ancient structures beneath the Martian surface had finally led to something promising. "I think we found it," Jack called out to his team, his voice slightly muffled by his environment suit's comm system. His heart beat faster as the metal detector in his hand beeped more urgently. There was definitely something unusual buried here. The dig site, located in a deep valley near Olympus Mons, had shown strange energy readings for weeks. Jack's team had chosen this location after satellite scans revealed geometric patterns that couldn't have formed naturally. But what they were about to discover would change humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. Using their plasma cutting tools, the team carefully carved through the rock. Hours passed as they slowly made their way deeper into the chamber. The light from their suits illuminated walls that were definitely not natural. They were too smooth, too precise. Strange symbols covered the surfaces, glowing faintly when their lights passed over them. "This is incredible," Jack muttered, running his gloved hand along the wall. The symbols reminded him of circuit boards, but they seemed to flow like water. As he moved deeper into the chamber, his light caught something that made him stop in his tracks. There, floating in a beam of energy at the center of the room, was a blade unlike anything he had ever seen. It was about the length of his forearm, its surface a deep blue that seemed to shift and move like the northern lights. The handle was made of what looked like crystal, with intricate patterns that pulsed with a soft inner light. Jack's research partner, Tom, stepped forward with their scanning equipment. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's powering this thing, it's still active after who knows how long." Despite all his training about handling unknown artifacts, something drew Jack toward the blade. It was as if it was calling to him. Before anyone could stop him, he reached out and wrapped his hand around the handle. The chamber erupted with light. The symbols on the walls blazed like stars, and the blade's crystal structure pulsed with energy. But instead of harm, Jack felt a warm sensation spread through his suit and into his body. The blade came free from its energy beam easily, as if it had been waiting for him. "Jack, are you all right?" Tom's worried voice crackled through the comm. "Your suit's readings just went crazy." "I'm fine," Jack replied, surprised to find that he truly was. The blade felt perfectly balanced in his hand, and the crystal seemed to hum in response to his touch. It's amazing. It feels alive somehow." As the team carefully documented their discovery, none of them noticed that the symbols on the walls had begun transmitting. Deep in space, ancient systems awakened, sending signals across the stars. Back at the research base, Jack spent hours studying the blade. Their instruments couldn't identify the materials it was made from. The crystal seemed to bend light in impossible ways, and the edge was sharper than anything their equipment could measure. Most strange of all, the blade responded differently to each person who held it. For most, it remained cold and lifeless, but in Jack's hands, it glowed with an inner fire. 3 days after the discovery, as Jack was running another series of tests, the base's alert system blared to life. Tom burst into the lab, his face pale. "Jack, you need to see this." On the main screen, a massive ship had appeared near Mars' orbit. Its surface shimmered like living crystal, and it was larger than anything humans had ever built. As they watched in awe, more ships began appearing. The blade in Jack's hands pulsed brightly, and for a moment, he could have sworn he heard a woman's voice, filled with both relief and rage, echoing in his mind. "My blade. After all these centuries." The crystal ships hung in Mars' orbit like shards of light. Earth's governments scrambled to respond, but before they could, a message arrived at every communication device in the Mars research base. The alien transmission came through in perfect English, as if the ships had been studying their language for years. "People of Earth, we are the Luminary. Your kind has found something that belongs to us. We come to reclaim it." The voice was feminine, and carried both power and age in its tone. "We will land at your coordinates in 1 hour. Prepare for our arrival." Jack stood in the base's main hall, the blade still humming softly in his grip. He had refused to lock it away despite the security team's demands. Something told him he needed to keep it close. "What should we do?" Tom asked, watching as more crystal ships appeared. Their count had reached 12 now, each one bigger than the largest Earth spacecraft. "We meet them," Jack replied simply. "We don't have much choice." The hour passed quickly as the base prepared for first contact. When the luminary ship landed, it did so with impossible grace for its size. A crystal pathway formed from its hull to the ground, glowing with the same energy Jack had seen in the blade. The aliens that emerged looked almost human, except their skin had a slight crystalline quality that caught the light. Their leader walked ahead of the others, her presence commanding attention. She wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of living light, and a crown of crystal spires adorned her head. "I am Queen Lumina of the Luminary," she announced, her eyes fixed on the blade in Jack's hands. "You hold the Starforge blade, the royal weapon of my bloodline, lost to us for 10,000 years. Jack felt the blade pulse warmly in his hands, but he noticed something odd. The Queen's eyes narrowed at this reaction. "We found it in an underground chamber," he explained. "It was protected by some kind of energy field." The Queen's face showed a flash of anger before returning to its regal calm. "That blade is our people's most sacred artifact. It can reshape the very energy of stars. In the wrong hands, it could destroy entire solar systems. Hand it over, and we will leave your world in peace." But as Jack moved to offer the blade, it suddenly flared with brilliant light. A barrier of energy formed between him and the Queen, surprising everyone present. The Queen's composed expression cracked, showing real anger now. "Impossible," she whispered. "The blade refuses me, its rightful wielder." Her voice rose with each word, and the crystal structures around them began to vibrate in response to her emotion. One of her advisors stepped forward, whispering something in her ear. The Queen's expression shifted from anger to intense curiosity as she looked at Jack more closely. "Tell me, human, what do you feel when you hold the blade?" she asked, her voice now carefully controlled. "Warmth," Jack answered honestly, "like it's trying to tell me something. Show me something." As he spoke, the blade's glow pulsed in rhythm with his words. The Queen's face darkened. "This changes things. You will return with us to our ship. We must understand why our sacred blade responds to you, a mere human." "He's not going anywhere." Tom stepped forward, but Jack raised his hand to stop his friend. "I'll go," Jack said, "but the blade stays with me until we understand what's happening." He didn't know where this courage came from, but the blade seemed to grow warmer at his words, supporting his decision. The Queen stared at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Very well. But know this, if you are somehow deceiving us, if you have found some way to trick the blade's ancient systems, the consequences will be severe. The blade is meant for luminary royal blood alone. Its reaction to you is troubling." As Jack prepared to board the alien ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to uncover something much bigger than a lost artifact. The blade's warm pulse against his palm seemed to agree. Inside the luminary ship, Jack found himself surrounded by living crystal. The walls pulsed with light that followed their movements, and the air itself seemed to shimmer. 2 guards walked beside him, their crystal armor catching the light with each step. The blade hadn't left his hand since they boarded, and the Queen watched him closely as they walked through the ship's corridors. Her anger seemed to grow each time the blade pulsed in response to Jack's touch. "Your world leaders are being contacted," the Queen informed him. "They must understand the importance of what you found. The blade isn't just a weapon. It's the key to our people's power." They entered a large chamber where screens of light floated in the air. Jack saw familiar faces on them, the leaders of Earth's major nations, all connected through the Luminary's advanced technology. "This human holds our most sacred artifact," the Queen announced to the screens. We demand its immediate return. One of Earth's leaders spoke up. The blade was found on Mars, which makes it a human discovery. We need time to study it, to understand its significance. The Queen's expression hardened. You don't understand. That blade can control the power of stars themselves. In the wrong hands, it could destroy your entire solar system. Jack listened to the arguments, but his attention was drawn to something else. The blade had started showing him things, images that flashed through his mind. He saw ancient battles, stars being shaped like clay, and something else, something the Queen wasn't telling them. Without thinking, Jack raised the blade. A beam of light shot from its tip, creating a huge image in the center of the room. Everyone fell silent as they watched scenes from the past play out before them. How did you do that? The Queen demanded, her voice shaking. Only those trained in the royal arts should be able to access the blade's memories. But Jack barely heard her. He was too focused on what the blade was showing him. He saw the luminary of the past using the blade not just to shape stars, but to destroy entire civilizations. He saw rebellion, betrayal, and finally, a group of luminary rebels hiding the blade away. Stop this at once, the Queen commanded, but the blade continued its display. One of Earth's leaders spoke up again. It seems there's more to this story than you've told us, Queen Lumina. The Queen's guards stepped forward, but suddenly found they couldn't move closer to Jack. The blade had created a barrier of light around him. The blade doesn't just respond to me, Jack said slowly, understanding filling his mind. It's trying to tell us something. Something about why it was hidden in the first place. The Queen's face had gone pale, her crystalline skin almost transparent. You know nothing of our history, human. But Jack was starting to understand more with each passing moment. The blade shared its knowledge freely with him, showing him how to use its power. When he waved his hand, the screens changed to show ancient luminary texts. According to these records, Jack said, reading the information the blade was translating for him, the blade chooses its wielder based on more than just blood. It looks for something else, something about intent and character. The Earth leaders watched in amazement as Jack used the blade's powers with growing confidence. The Queen's anger had turned to shock, then to fear. Impossible, she whispered. All our records say only royal blood can. She stopped mid-sentence as Jack created a complex pattern of light in the air, something that, according to the blade's memories, only true wielders could do. I think, Jack said carefully, we need to talk about the real reason this blade was hidden on Mars. And maybe more importantly, why it's choosing to work with humans now. The blade hummed with approval, its light growing stronger. Around them, the ship's crystal walls pulsed in rhythm with the blade's energy, as if the very vessel itself was responding to a power it recognized as legitimate. The medical bay of the luminary ship glowed with soft blue light as machines scanned Jack's body. The blade remained in his grip, refusing to leave his side even during the tests. Queen Lumina stood watching, her face a mask of confusion and growing concern. This can't be right, said the luminary doctor, looking at the floating screens of light. His DNA, there are markers in it that match our royal bloodline. But that's impossible. The Queen stepped closer to the screens, her crystalline crown catching the light. Show me those results again. As they studied his DNA, Jack felt the blade sharing more visions with him. He saw a great war from thousands of years ago. Luminary ships filled the skies of many worlds, but these weren't images of victory. They were memories of rebellion. There was a group of your people, Jack said slowly, speaking the words as the blade revealed them to him. They didn't agree with how the royal family was using the blade's power. They were led by someone from the royal family itself. The Queen's head snapped up. Those are sealed records. How could you possibly know that? The blade is showing me, Jack replied. Your ancestor, Princess Aurora, she led the rebellion. She believed the blade's power was being misused to conquer rather than create. She, Jack's eyes widened as the next revelation came to him. She came to Earth. The doctor's hands moved quickly over the floating screens. My queen, looking at these genetic markers. They're degraded by time, but they match Princess Aurora's line perfectly. The queen sank into a nearby chair, her usual regal posture forgotten. Aurora wasn't killed in the final battle like our histories claim. She escaped to Earth. Her voice was barely a whisper. Jack saw more visions, humans and Luminary living together on Earth thousands of years ago. He saw the blade being used to protect them from natural disasters, to help them build shelters. He saw Princess Aurora's descendants slowly mixing with the human population. Your people's DNA became part of humanity's, Jack said. That's why some of us can use the blade. We're all distant descendants of those original rebels. The blade pulsed strongly, creating a hologram in the center of the room. It showed Princess Aurora speaking, her final message preserved within the blade itself. To whoever finds this blade, the ancient princess's image said, know that true power comes not from conquest, but from protection. I hide this blade on Mars, far from both Earth and our homeworld. It will wait until someone worthy finds it, someone who will use it not for power, but for the good of all. The queen stared at the image of her ancient relative, her anger replaced by shock. All this time, our histories were changed. The rebels weren't traitors trying to steal the blade's power. They were trying to prevent its misuse. Jack felt the blade's warmth spreading through his arm. More genetic data appeared on the floating screens, showing how the Luminary DNA had spread through human bloodlines over thousands of years. That's why Earth felt familiar to us, the doctor said. Why humans look so similar to our people. They're our distant cousins. The queen looked at Jack with new eyes. You're not just some human who stole our blade. You're the heir to a legacy we've forgotten. She paused, watching as the blade continued to pulse with light in Jack's hands. But that creates a new problem. What do you mean? Jack asked, though the blade was already showing him the answer. If you are truly of Aurora's bloodline, if you can truly use the blade as she did. The queen's expression grew troubled. Then you have a legitimate claim to the Luminary throne. And that means every power-hungry noble in our empire will either want to control you or eliminate you. The blade flared brightly, as if accepting this new challenge. In its light, Jack saw flashes of what was to come. Plots, betrayals, and a chance to bridge two civilizations that never knew they were connected. News of Jack's heritage spread through the Luminary fleet like wildfire. Within hours, 3 more massive ships arrived, carrying members of the royal court who demanded to see this human who could wield the blade. The queen had no choice but to call a formal gathering. The great hall of the queen's flagship stretched longer than a football field, its crystal walls reaching up into darkness. Hundreds of Luminary nobles filled the space, their crystalline clothing sparkling under the floating lights. Jack stood at one end of the hall, the blade glowing steadily in his grip. This is madness, one noble shouted. A human cannot hold claim to the throne, no matter what blood runs in his veins. The queen sat on her crystal throne, watching the chaos unfold. Her own position was now in danger. If Jack truly was Aurora's heir, her right to rule could be challenged. Let him prove his worth, another noble called out. The blade itself will show us the truth. The blade pulsed in Jack's hand, and suddenly he knew what he had to do. He stepped forward, raising the weapon high. The blade's light filled the hall, and images began to form in the air around them. You want proof. Jack's voice carried clearly through the space. The blade doesn't just show the past, it shows the truth of the present too. Images appeared of different Luminary worlds. But instead of the perfect society the nobles claimed to rule, the blade revealed the reality. Worlds stripped of resources, people living in poverty while the nobles grew richer, corruption spreading through their empire like a disease. Stop this at once. A noble stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. But when he tried to approach Jack, the blade's barrier held him back. The blade shows what needs to be seen, Jack said, remembering Princess Aurora's words. It's not about power or conquest. It's about protection and truth. The queen stood from her throne, her eyes fixed on the images around them. He's right. We'd forgotten our true purpose. Aurora didn't flee because she was weak. She fled because she saw what we were becoming. More nobles tried to rush forward, but the blade's power held them all back. Jack felt its energy flowing through him, showing him exactly what to do. With a wave of his hand, he created a dome of light that covered the entire hall. Within this dome, Jack announced, "No one can lie. The blade's power reveals all truth." He turned to face the queen, including the truth about why you really want the blade back. The queen tried to speak, but under the dome's power, her true words came out. "I needed to maintain control. Without the blade's power, the noble houses will tear our empire apart." Gasps filled the hall. The queen had just admitted what everyone knew, but no one dared say their empire was failing. "Then maybe it's time for a change," Jack said. The blade hummed in agreement, its light growing brighter. Not a human taking over, and not the old royal family staying in power. Something new. Something that brings both our peoples together, the way Aurora intended. The blade suddenly lifted from Jack's hands, floating in the center of the hall. Its light touched everyone present, and in that moment, they all saw Aurora's original vision. Humans and Luminary working together, using their combined strength to build rather than destroy. "The blade has made its choice," the queen said quietly. "It doesn't want a single ruler anymore. It wants us to learn to rule ourselves." Some nobles shouted in protest, but others stood silent, moved by what they'd seen. The blade floated back to Jack's hand, but its light now spread to touch the queen as well, creating a bridge between them. "We have much to discuss," Jack said, looking at the queen. "About the future of both our peoples." The queen nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. The blade hadn't chosen a new ruler. It had chosen a new way forward. The next few days on the Luminary flagship were filled with endless meetings. Jack sat through them all, the blade always at his side, as both Earth's leaders and the Luminary nobles argued about what should happen next. The blade's revelations had shaken both civilizations to their core. "The blade must be preserved in our royal vaults," one Luminary noble insisted during yet another heated debate. "It's too powerful to be left in human hands." "And why should we trust you with it?" an Earth representative fired back. "We've all seen how your empire has misused its power." The queen sat silently through most of these arguments, watching Jack with thoughtful eyes. The blade's truth-revealing power had changed her, stripped away her anger, and replaced it with something else. Wisdom, perhaps, or acceptance. Jack felt the blade's warmth against his palm as another vision came to him. This time, he saw something different, not the past, but possible futures. In one, he kept the blade, tried to rule both humans and Luminary himself. In another, he gave it back to the queen, letting things return to how they were. But there was a third path, one that the blade seemed to prefer. "Everyone here is missing the point," Jack said, standing up. The blade's light filled the room, commanding attention. "The blade isn't meant to be owned. It's meant to guide." He walked to the center of the room, and the blade created a display of stars around them. "Look at what we could achieve together. Humans have something the Luminary lost long ago, the ability to adapt, to change, to see new possibilities. And the Luminary have knowledge and technology that could help humanity avoid the same mistakes they made." The blade's light touched each person in the room, sharing visions of cooperation between the two species. Cities built with both human innovation and Luminary crystal technology. Spaceships exploring the galaxy together. New worlds where both species could live and work as equals. "But none of that can happen if we keep fighting over who owns the blade," Jack continued. "It's not about ownership. It's about responsibility." The queen stood up, her crystal crown catching the blade's light. "What are you suggesting?" Jack took a deep breath. The blade showed him what needed to be done, but the choice had to be his. I suggest we create a council, half human, half luminary. The blade won't belong to either side. Instead, it will help guide both our peoples toward a better future. Impossible. Several nobles shouted. The blade is our heritage. The blade, Jack reminded them, was hidden by your own princess because she saw what would happen if it stayed in one person's hands. Maybe it's time we listen to her wisdom. The blade suddenly lifted from Jack's hands, floating in the center of the room. Its light touched everyone present, and in that moment, they all felt what Jack had been feeling. The blade's desire not to rule, but to guide. There's something else, the queen said quietly. The blade shows me that if we don't change, if we don't find a new way forward, both our civilizations will eventually fall. We've grown stagnant in our crystal towers, while humans... She looked at Jack with new respect. Humans never stop reaching for the stars. The blade returned to Jack's hand, but its light now created a network of connections between everyone in the room. Human and luminary alike could feel the possibility of something new, something better than either of them could achieve alone. The choice is ours, Jack said. We can keep fighting over the past, or we can build something new together. The blade doesn't want a keeper, it wants partners. The room fell silent as both humans and luminary considered his words. The blade's light pulsed steadily, waiting for their decision. 1 month after Jack's proposal, the great crystal chamber was ready. Built together by human and luminary engineers, it stood in a neutral location on Mars, not far from where the blade had first been discovered. The chamber would serve as both a meeting place for the new council and a home for the blade. Jack walked through the chamber's main hall, admiring how earth steel and luminary crystal had been woven together to create something entirely new. The blade hummed happily in his hand, approval radiating through its warm glow. It's time, the queen said, entering the chamber with her guards. She looked different now. Her crown was simpler, and her expression had lost its harsh edge. Behind her came the human representatives, including Tom, who had refused to leave his friend's side through all of this. The blade suddenly lifted from Jack's hand, floating to the center of the chamber. Its light spread out, creating a circular table with seats for both humans and luminary. Above the table, star maps sparkled, showing both known and unexplored space. The first meeting of the Joint Council will now begin, Jack announced. He had been chosen as the first mediator, though the position would rotate between species. The blade had made it clear that no one person should hold power for too long. As everyone took their seats, the blade created a display of their first joint project, a mission to help dying stars that the luminary had given up on. Human creativity combined with luminary technology had found new solutions that neither side could have discovered alone. The blade has shown us something important, Jack said, looking around the table. It's not just a weapon or a tool. It's a reminder that we're stronger together than apart. The queen nodded. My people had grown proud, believing we had all the answers. We forgot that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places. She looked at Jack with respect, from people we once thought were beneath us. Tom spoke up from his seat. And we humans were so busy looking up at the stars, we never realized we had a connection to them all along. He grinned at Jack, though finding out we're part alien was a bit of a surprise. The blade pulsed with what felt like laughter, its light dancing across the faces of everyone present. It created images of Princess Aurora, showing her pride at seeing her dream finally coming true. Humans and luminary working together as equals. There will be challenges ahead, Jack admitted. Not everyone is happy with these changes. Some nobles still want the old ways back. And some humans are scared of sharing power with aliens, Tom added. Even if we are distant cousins. The blade flared suddenly, its light filling the chamber. It showed them glimpses of possible futures, some dark with conflict, others bright with possibility. But the brightest future, the one that felt most right, was the path they were on now. The blade isn't just choosing us. The Queen realized, watching the visions. It's choosing hope over fear, cooperation over control. As if agreeing with her words, the blade created its final display. A new symbol combining human and luminary elements. This would be the mark of their joint council, a reminder that the best solutions come from working together. So, Jack said, smiling as the blade settled into its new home at the center of the table, "Shall we begin?" The blade's light touched everyone present, and in that moment, they all felt the weight of this new beginning. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and arguments, doubts and fears. But they had something that neither civilization had possessed before. A true partnership, guided by an artifact that had waited thousands of years for this very moment. As the first joint session began, the blade's light pulsed steadily, content at last. Its journey hadn't ended with its discovery on Mars. That had just been the beginning. Its true purpose wasn't to be a weapon or a tool of power, but a bridge between stars and species, guiding them all toward a brighter future.